I've been a hunter my whole life. I lost my dad a few years ago, and he was a hunter. And I think that he would be really tickled to be able to tell the people back home at the coffee shop that his son is out hunting a lion.
The Safari Club International Show is the largest hunting convention in the planet.
Crocodiles are really mean. Besides that, I want a pair of boots.
Poachers will shoot every last one because there's a commercial-driven desire.
People are confused how hunting and conservation go together.
You can just pick whatever animal you want from the menu that they offer you, see the price, and book the kill.
Big cats at 21 and at 22, sold!
And that money will all go back into conservation.
How much for that sucker?
35,000.
I have the recipe to save the rhino from extinction. Sell the horns, keep the rhinos alive. On the black market, the retail value of this horn would be $250,000. The operation is painless. It'll take 2 years before it goes through the same procedure again. All I need is for it to be legal. Give me one animal that's gone extinct while farmers were breeding it and making money out of it. There's not one.
You know, I'm paying for this hunt. People are employed because we're hunting.
If there's no value and we can't hunt these animals, they're going to be extinct.
The commodification of wildlife, what a vision of nature that will be.
They like to talk about conservation. They're just greenwashing. They enjoy killing. The change is coming. We're going to put an end to this.
Surely we want our world to survive.
We have to keep this fight going.
This is my trophy, and there's not any bureaucrat that can take it away from me.
So excited to chat about this film. I love this movie. I mean, congratulations, guys. You know, let's just get right into it. You know, how do you decide this as your subject?
You know, we started this about 3.5, 4 years ago, and it actually started in our kitchen. And Shaul came across a number of photos online of a hunter that was standing over his kill. And he was shocked and disgusted, and I think I was doing something in the back, and he's like, I can't believe this is going on. And I said, you know, Shaul's trophy hunting, it exists.
Like what?
Yeah.
And the thing is, I grew up in northern Minnesota, and their hunting is a common practice. It's what you do on the weekend. And he grew up in Israel, and he can speak to that.
Didn't know of any of this.
Where, talk about Bambi.
Yeah, to me, shooting a deer was Bambi. I was very anti. I was, you know, it was just hard to stomach. I love animals, and I just didn't see this coming. And yeah, Christina kind of gave me a little bit of this education of coming from that world, not trophy hunting or not a hunter, but just growing up with it, you know, that everybody around. Yeah. And we ended up going to Las Vegas.
So we went to Las Vegas, the Safari Club International Convention, and there's 25,000 people that come through that, and that's where the world just opened up. Wow. And you can buy hunts, you can buy clothing, you can buy guns, you can buy your scope from Nikon, you can insure your trophy with AIG, and we didn't realize how vast this industry was. And I think we decided we wanted to shame them. We wanted to say, this is not good.
And that all would change, because what the initial reaction to look at all this money, how could... was this idea that people starting, well, if it pays, it stays. And we're like, what? Well, what happens when you put an economic value on an animal? And thus, if there is big game in an industry, could that trickle down? And that's when I think things got complicated, and we decided to start being curious and less opinionated, at least at the start, and kind of walk through this confusing maze that I think 3.5 years later still confuses us.
Yeah, I mean, you found some incredible subjects to interview and to talk and to participate in the documentary. Can you tell me a little bit about that process and finding those guys? You know, Chris, to be one of them?
Yeah, I mean, Chris is definitely one of them. He's actually somebody that we met really late in production. You know, and I'm sure he can speak to our experience, and maybe that's what we start with, is we met him, we were on a hunt. Our hunting character is a guy by the name of Philip Glass. And so we followed him through his journey to hunt the Big Five. And
can you explain what the Big Five is?
So the Big Five is a rhino, a lion, a leopard, a buffalo, and an elephant.
And to some people, that's like climbing the Everest. That is a long...
7 points for,
Yeah, it's a bit strange.
So one of the hunts was the lion hunt, and that was taking place in Zimbabwe. And we got to the camp, and like we normally did, and this time somebody new was there. And it was Chris, and he was, he was told to us that he's a wildlife officer and anti-poacher, and we were really interested in this aspect between community and hunting, and community and conservation, and how hunting plays into that. And so he was kind of our guiding light through that, and it really was really illuminating, enlightening, even for us at that point.
Yeah, it was strange to have an anti-poacher that works so hard to protect the animals be in the same camp with hunters. And actually, you could speak to that, your take on hunting.
Yeah, hunting, if we didn't have hunting, I work in a very small area with a very small tribe, building the sustainable development and sustainable future for these folk. Without hunting, right now, there would be no water, no clinic, no school. It's done a huge amount for the community that I live in. I understand the huge disconnect, maybe with the West and Africa, but the place we live is a little bit different. The lions aren't cuddly; they eat people.
Yeah. Can you explain how sort of the landscape has changed and how you got into anti-poaching?
Well, this is where John Hume comes in and why this film is so challenging. I mean, Christina and Shaul have put this movie together. I hope it challenges and you must go and see this because it challenges the very instinct that most people have of this hunting and death of animals. We've found, well, for example, there are no rhino left where I work. They are extinct. Yeah. The people have lost this amazing thing. They have been poached, every last one. And we need to start looking at these various alternatives like Johnny Hume, cutting off horn and selling it. It's a sustainable thing, and we're not killing the animal. We need to look at all of these multi-layered approaches. For me, it's for the Tonga people. That's what it's all about, from my side. And so I'm not against hunting because it's a part of life for us.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stats that you throw out there, I mean, going from 500,000 rhinos to less than 30,000, I mean, that's shocking, obviously. How did you guys find Johnny and the work that he was doing?
John was actually, right after that trip to Las Vegas, somebody told us, go meet this guy who's really, I'm sorry, but a piece of shit, greedy guy who wants to make money off animals. And I was like, this is when we were like, money, animals, this is more confusing than we thought. And then we traveled to South Africa, and we met John, and we weren't convinced or not convinced immediately of what he says or the idea of like, wait, here's, this animal that has the world's most expensive animal commodity, and that's what's killing it. And suddenly he says, well, maybe that's what saves it. But before we even dove into the subject, what was really apparent is that this guy is not putting on a show. A lot of people said, hey, he's just in it for business, he's in it for greed. And we met this older guy who just seemed on a life mission. And John has invested $60 million. He was quite a rich man into a breeding operation that has bred over 1,000, but now watches over 1,500 rhinos. That's 5% of the world's rhinos. That's more than any country has done. And he's stockpiled by trimming the horn, 5 tons of horn. Now, here's the trick. It's worse in fury. Hundreds of millions on a black market somewhere else in the world, but he's not allowed to sell it, so he's made $0. And this is this weird quagmire of if we create an economic value, obviously people want to participate. They want to breed. They want to take care. If there's none, most people don't want a rhino on their land. It's a shit magnet for bad people with guns to come shoot it. And so we got confused pretty quickly, as you can tell, about all of it, I think.
And I think initially, there's a big misconception with the rhino. I think going into, we thought, okay, you cut the horn, you have to kill the animal in order to harvest the horn. And the reality is you don't. First of all, the horn grows back. It's the same material as in our fingernails. And so once you take the idea of killing an animal out of the equation, you're like, well, wait, this is kind of a no-brainer. And I think one thing that John advocates is that, let me sell the rhino horn. Other people will want to breed it, just like me, will want to make money off of it. just like me, but there will be more rhinos. And then you give them to communities like where Chris is from, and actually then it incentivizes local people to want to look after the resource they have and not kill the wildlife for poaching, which is one of the only resources out there right now.
Yeah. Chris, what's your opinion on that? Yeah.
I'm from the pointy end of the spear, and this is challenging me. If I could have an option like John's, I believe that there's a possibility, a strong likelihood, that there would be rhino in the Zambezi River Valley where I am, because it would benefit the communities, and that's what it's all about. It's all about sustainability. It's the key catchword in all of this. Poachers will kill hundreds. Hunters will kill 1%. We have to look at these numbers and challenge our own views, and we have to challenge our own views because we're all working to the same goal. We all want to see wildlife and these majestic animals progress with us into our futures. So the things that we've been doing are not working. Some areas they are, some they're not. We need to look at alternative ideas and different directions.
John's a bit of a quagmire. It's a little bit more difficult to understand, but something, a character like Philip, I mean, how did you come upon him? He's a little more, out there as far as opinions towards hunting, yeah?
We met Philip actually in the airport of Namibia. He had been introduced to us through the outfitter to say, and the outfitter said, this is Philip Glass, he's interested in having you come along on his elephant hunt.
So you're like the composer?
It's not the composer.
That'd be very different.
Different Philip Glass. So we arrived at the airport, and Philip right away started talking to us and was so interested to have us there. And I think that was kind of perplexing at first because a lot of other hunters at that point were kind of like, yes, we like this idea, but no. And so Philip, his encouragement, his enthusiasm to be a part of this was like, okay, this is interesting. And so Philip as a character is the same on camera and off camera. And I think that was really important because we can disagree or agree on a ton of things, but he still really believes that that his role in hunting is a help for conservation and that he's going to do it no matter what anybody says.
And it was nice that way. You could come up to him and say, I completely disagree with you. Talk to me. And he wouldn't, a lot of people would be guarded, hurt, attack-ive, and he'd be like, and some things made sense, and some things, when you'll see the movie, not believing in evolution made less sense to us. But I think early on, again, we had a little bit of a different take. I was more, couldn't take it, disgusted. And then, the man shoots an elephant and you're just... But I started taking this, let's say he's a psychopath. Let's say he enjoys killing. He won't agree to that. Maybe I think that way. Can it benefit wildlife? And it was hard for me to curve past that, and it's something we're trying to challenge viewers. There's a heart and mind battle here. And heart's important, don't get me wrong. You should listen to your heart and emotions, but we should also think. And that was kind of nice was Philip's character, because he sees godly dominion over animals, and I didn't agree. But he also told me, you use animals, you just ate a burger, you're wearing leather shoes. When I do a trophy hunt, yes, I hang it on my wall, but somebody's eating the meat. We're using the animal, so in a sense I'm giving it more value and there's more breeding. And that was actually factually true. And so it's these points that I think we started to say, it's more interesting to question this subject, because I think Chris said something really key. The weird thing on this controversial subject is everybody's actually trying to get the same place. How do we get these magical animals to stay tuned, stay around? And so with that understanding, particularly in this political climate where everybody screams and no one listens, we started thinking, how do we channel this a little different?
I mean, can you explain a little bit about the economics behind, how much are these people spending? I mean, it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right, to hunt an elephant?
It's a rich man's sport. An elephant's a little less than 100,000 typically. A lion's right around there. I think that's what he paid for the lion.
Yeah, I'd guess around about that $100,000 mark.
A rhino could be $250,000 and up. It's a weird, ironic. The more close to extinction, the more expensive.
See, that's a little bit of a twist there that I found there. Yeah.
But if you think about it, that's a commodity.
Yeah.
Right? You have a lot of it. It's cheap.
Yeah.
And $50,000 because half of that would go into the community. And $50,000 goes a long way to building schools, rebuilding roads and bridges, clinics, mosquito nets, and anti-malaria drugs. It's really important.
What Chris tries to do with his community is say, look, let's think that these elephants are yours to watch over in a sustainable, again, that word way. And if somebody's poaching, he's robbing you. He's killing that animal, and he's not sharing. When
controlling,
it trickles down. And so once you start getting locals, and we also have to understand, we sit here and we say, let's protect lions, they're so majestic. They are. They also eat people. And if a lion ran outside here in New York, we would feel a little different. Chris deals with this on a daily basis. So you have to give him some.
It's a pretty, difficult scene where you're actually talking to a family about a lion that is, killed some of their livestock and has the potential. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and having to deal with that on a daily basis?
It's quite an interesting subject, really, because the lion was breaking into houses because it had walked into a poacher's snare and had broken some ribs. The people's livestock that's being eaten by this lion in a drought year, which that particular year was, they would sell their livestock and buy food. So that lion, if it didn't eat somebody, even if it ate their livestock, you're looking at a very, very dire future, and there's a strong possibility of starvation, etc., unless somebody steps in to help you. So this human-wildlife conflict is a really hot issue, and a lot of work is done. We do a lot of work trying to keep that boundary clear, or as clear as we can, bearing in mind we live in amongst these animals. It's pretty difficult.
Yeah. What's the public opinion basically on hunting these days? Is it changing? Is it shifting with the communities?
I think there's a lot more enlightenment. And we have a huge educational drive with school kids and meeting with tribal elders. So I believe that people are thinking a lot more about how to utilize a resource. John sort of epitomizes that. There isn't only one thing, and I think that's the beauty of this subject, and why you should watch this is because there are so many different layers to this, and not one particular layer, as you peel it off, actually fits. It's a very complicated little jigsaw, and they've done as good as they can to try and portray that. But yeah, we're peeling layers and looking at lots of different alternatives, and there's a lot out there. A company that helps fund me is a carbon credit offset company working with a community. And that's, again, you start looking at all these various different options. So for me, it's all community. And
So what he's talking about is we have companies trying to stop the cutting of trees. A lot of this loss of land is what hunting kind of does well, is you have to keep this land the way it is, and you have to keep people's interest from taking over, bringing in a supermarket, their cows. And so hunting kind of does well, and not cutting trees obviously does us well. So it is a very mixed bag. Tourism is a huge thing. It's super effective. It is, however, effective for very small parts of Africa, because if you guys want to go see wildlife, you probably want to go to the best place where you'll see a lot. And where Chris is, it's rough and it's tumbly, and you'll see some stuff, but not as much as you'll see in Kruger. So it's taking all these things and working together. The problem in this subject is working together doesn't work. People are battling.
And I think, too, just so going back to the reasons why we made this film in that sense, is that I think we both took a journey throughout this whole film. And I think that's what we aimed for the audience to do, in that, you come in with your preconceived notions, you come in with your ideas about how we use and utilize and don't use wildlife. And we want to say that maybe what you're thinking is not so black and white. And so we hope people will come into the film, watch it. It's tough to watch at times, but it's also something that is super important, that if you do care about wildlife, come and see this. And in turn, you're going to leave with many more questions and answers. And I think that really peeling back those layers is a constant thing, and the discussion will go on and on. So it's an important subject.
Absolutely. And I think, again, you say there's some difficult scenes. There absolutely are. I'm sure they were very difficult to be around. I mean, when the hunters shooting a croc, point blank range in the head. I mean, something like that. As an animal lover, I mean, what was it like to be there and sort of have to step outside of your own feelings about it?
It was very difficult. I think the hardest one was actually being with Philip on that Big Five and the elephant. It was early on, and we've both never seen elephants in the wild, and here we are a couple of days.
That was your first experiencing elephants, was on that?
Yeah, the first couple of days. It took a couple of days for that shot to happen, but you kept seeing them, and they're so amazing, and they're like a family. They're social, and you could kind of feel them talk, and I can't... Words will fail me on how kind of majestic they are, but you also feel very tiny and small because keep in mind you're walking through this, and suddenly you realize the sheer power. So it is a bit scary. I won't lie. And then it happened so quick, and I remember the sound of just the cries of the other elephants escaping, and it was terrible. To be honest, I hated Philip at that moment, although I was there knowing what was the goal of this. And sorry, but this is kind of the mindfuck of this issue. We sat there for an hour wrenching, literally crying. And then all these locals heard about this and they started coming because they get the meat. And everybody was happy. And suddenly you're like, I don't see this in the same way the locals are. They do not think of this animal. Their relationship is super different. They are thinking of the meat they're going to get. And they're happy. And
I think one villager says it should have been a bigger one. Right?
It should have been a bigger one. I didn't get into that. The goal in hunting is to shoot old males because you don't hurt the breeding, and then and supposedly you've let that animal live his life. And this is the grays in life. Philip ended up shooting quite a young bull, which was very heartbreaking because that elephant could have lived a longer life. To the locals, it was more meat. They see it differently. And we have to, the Western Americans, we try and help people in the most profound, heartful way, but we many times don't. We see it through our mindset, and that's very hard to help because we need to get into their mindset.
Absolutely. Well, I think this documentary does a great job of it. We have some questions in the audience, so we're going to go there.
Great. We're going to start with a question from an online viewer. Okay. So Madison would like to know, can you talk about Cecil the lion and the notion of luring a protected animal into a trap? That seems to defy what real hunting should be.
Sure. In the situation with Cecil, I mean, I think really it was this global outrage, and I personally think it got blown out of proportion because it was a legal hunt. And how hunting works in Africa is you are the client, you come from America or Europe or wherever, and you have a local guide on the ground. And they are the ones that tell you what to shoot, when to shoot, where to shoot. And I think Walter Palmer got really thrown under the bus for something that wasn't necessarily his entire fault. And I think that's something to be said about this is that, boundaries in Africa where he was hunting, there is no fences. Animals come and move throughout. They come into the park and they leave the park. And the animal was outside of the park. I mean, granted, the animal was collared, and a lot of animals are collared there. And I think there's an understanding that you maybe shouldn't shoot this animal, but it's not illegal to do so.
And Chris, was there a public opinion on the matter?
Well, funnily enough, in Zimbabwe, none of us had ever heard of Cecil. It was this weird thing that exploded in the press overseas, and it, to be honest, didn't really make a great deal of sense to us. In these hunting areas, the numbers of animals allowed to be hunted actually include the population within the park. So, luring it and all this huge uproar. And look, I understand because there's such a huge disconnect. But to us, it was this weird thing, and we didn't really understand it, to be honest.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Next question.
Yes, here you deal with the rhino that's got a commodity that is sustainable. What about like a lion or the leopard, where I'm assuming it's the skin that has to be killed? How do you get to the natives to protect those when they have to be killed for the commodity to be useful?
There's continuous work. Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife have a great deal to do with it. There are continuous ongoing surveys, counting of populations, etc. So it's a very measured, small offtake. And that revenue then goes back into the communities. It's a pretty neat little circle unless it's disrupted somewhere by a bad person.
And so about 1% is a typical offtake. And if the surveys work, for example, Fish and Wildlife will say, okay, I see that in Namibia and Caprivi, where Philip was hunting, there have been 7 elephants in that case, quota. It looks like it held, and poaching has been, it always exists, but has been reasonable. We'll let you import that trophy. If we see that it doesn't work, because the idea is to make hunting replace that. Again, for the communities to say, we're going to care, nobody's going to steal our commodity. Once again, you have to get into this mindset of commodity, which is not comfortable, and if you don't want to get into that, I understand, but that's the challenge. And so that's kind of how, yes, most animals have to die to be used, and so how do we do it sustainably? And it's a challenge, and there have been places where hunting has overstepped and has destroyed, and we have to be very careful of that.
Definitely. Okay, one last question.
Hi. So I've read that 3D printed horns are being used as a substitute for real life rhino and elephant horns. Do you think that that will help populations in some way?
I think everything is worth a shot. I really do, and that's what we, to some degree, are trying to promote in it. You know, I think with rhino horn, I know more of that 3D printing. I think people want to see that it's a real thing, but if you can trick them, because apparently it's quite good, then it's great. Anything we could do, you know, and there will be those on the other side that will say no, because you're encouraging the demand. My problem is, and it's a little bit like the drug war, which I made a movie on, is sometimes we go into this issues pretending we could just make the world this perfect place. So if it rained money, I'd be against hunting. If we could really eradicate demand, then we don't need the John Humes of the world to tell, look, I just don't think it's real. So yes, any solution like that can curve the supply that rhinos and elephants won't die, I'm for it.
Well, you guys have done a fantastic job. Trophy is the name of the film. Please see it in theaters, guys, if you can. Tell all of your friends. And it's coming to CNN, right, next year? Is that right?
That is right. I'll be on CNN next year.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Thank you so much. Give them a round of applause, guys.
Thank you.